Removing Trump is not enough. He must be prosecuted.
I don't care if this opens the door to future presidents being prosecuted. The last 4+ years of Trump's crimes must be addressed. It's a good door to open. If you become president or even senator and act like Trump has been acting, you deserve penalties. This isn't Russia where Putin makes a new law that he can have extra terms or makes a new law that gives him immunity after he leaves the presidency. There should be no loophole to be an *SS hole during your public service without facing the penalties. That door is already open. This corrupt syndicate and its 70M+ fans have graduated from calling for political prosecution to demanding blood and turning on their own in 4 years. Hyperbole? Hypocrisy? Sure, but don't doubt their sincerity for a minute. If not stopped, they'll tear the US apart and/or seize power and reject democracy altogether. We must ignore their whinging and poisoned discourse and set about the task of administering justice with grim determination while there's still time. After that, the dark money, propaganda, and corrupt foreign influence must be stopped. It's not for pleasure, not for revenge, it's to uphold the core tenets of this nation of laws. Sympathy is for afterwards. Nuremberg, then Kumbaya. I want to know how to make it undesirable for cowards and grifters to be in Congress. These entitled fucks, Loeffler and Perdue, getting wealthy off people's misery and illness, while being pissed at their own party for not putting their thumbs in the scale. They are mad they have to do this runoff. How do we make it so people with work ethic go to Congress? Something is wrong. They like the campaign finance and lies game more than doing the right thing for their state. So Trump is also looking to preemptively pardon his kids. This shit's crazy. He and his associates need to be prosecuted. Even then, I'm not sure half of conservatives would regain their sanity. It's crazy. We're at this point. Morals don't matter to lots of Trump supporters, at least right now. Trump literally said it in 2016-15. He could shoot somebody in the middle of the street and his people would still show up. It's a cult, and they will continue to scream at the swamp when he's locked up for legitimate crimes. Correct. If we do nothing about what Trump has done, think about it behaviorally. Basically have a tantrum and you either get what you want or nothing happens positively or negatively. Every child learning those repercussions would then have tantrums all the time and take their chances. Same principle applies. We need to set the example that a tantrum with our democracy at stake is punishable, or else everyone else will try what Trump did until a smarter, craftier one succeeds and democracy dies. It needs to be in clear black and white the crimes he's committed, providing proof for each crime he's committed so everyone can see. It needs to be enough for Republicans to understand why he is being prosecuted, because right now he has too many still on his side regardless of everything he has done. Obviously there is a cult there, so some won't care, but it needs to show the history books why he has been so corrupt as president. Simply prosecuting him, although I will be surprised if he isn't enough, as Republicans will just claim it's Dems getting back at Trump, and if anything that will rile them up even more. The issue is too many Republicans just see this as a war between them and the Dems, so even prosecuting him they will just see that Dems v reps whatever he's charged with. I don't think Biden should be involved in prosecuting *******. However, Biden's AG should be given free rein to prosecute 45 if they choose to pursue charges, with Biden keeping the whole debacle at arm's length. 45 and his whole cadre of fascist wannabes absolutely should be held to the law, but I'm uncomfortable with the idea of presidents directly engaged in the prosecution of their political rivals. Our two parties are not the same, but they're beholden to the same group, corporations. Sure, they're beholden to different degrees, but at the end of the day, corporations' interests come before those of the people and of the nation. The rule of law is one such interest that will take a back seat when the Biden administration seeks to heal the nation by doing absolutely fuck all to see any Trump official pay for any of their crimes. If any Trump spends a day in jail, then I'm Jeff Bezos. If you think Biden has the political will to go after Trump, or to even just not stop his doogie from going after Trump, you're going to be in for a bad time. It's never going to happen. Biden still thinks the GOP is a group you can play nice with, while McConnell is already saying he's going to block every single thing he tries. Nothing gets better now, nothing. For the people reading this post 100 years into the future. Yes, it was as bad as it sounds like. When we are long gone and this president is long forgotten. He failed to unite the country in a time of need. He could had done the bare minimum and we would had been on a better place. He never grasped the importance of leading by example. It's not going to happen. Nobody was prosecuted for the Dubia administration crimes, Iraq War, rendition and torture, GFC, etc. Nobody was prosecuted for the Reagan-Bush administration's crimes, Contra War, selling arms to Iran, and simultaneously to Iraq, S&L scandal, etc. A culture of lawlessness has developed among America's ruling class. This is the best TLDR I could make, original reduced by 90%. I'm a bot. On Sunday, Trump gave an interview to Fox News' Maria Bartiromo, in which he spun yet more fantasies about machines flipping his votes to Biden, along with a nationwide conspiracy by big city politicians to defraud him of electoral victory. While Trump was spouting this conspiracist nonsense, Wisconsin was completing its recount and confirming that Biden had indeed beaten Trump in that state, and by a slightly larger margin than the initial count showed. Trump is not only not admitting any culpability, but his rampage against the legal, political, and cultural pillars of American democracy is actually intensifying as his term in office draws to a close. Either no man is above the law, including the president, or he is. If we do not prosecute Trump for his crimes committed leading up to or during his term of office, then we need to stop pretending that this idea is true, and admit that we are living under some form of constitutional monarchy. If we don't get the Senate in January, fat fucking chance this happens. Would be pointless to pursue in today's political climate. If the cards are stacked against us, I'd much rather Biden just completely ignore him, not waste his 4 years and what a lot of the country sees as a witch hunt, and actually tries to govern. We haven't had a real president in 4 years, and I think he would be better off reminding people what a president actually does. His mafia of an administration is filled with conservative crooks that also avoided prosecution for their decades of crimes. They will coalesce around the next fascist the GOP can dig up and become even worse unless actual prosecution happens this time. I have little hope for it to happen, but something has to change or they will be even more dangerous. It is sad to see that with Moscow Mitch standing aside and in the way, all Americans can do is watch Donald Trump throw his toys and rip up his coloring books in a final meltdown to destroy the government from within. It is nothing short of treason, and he deserves the rest of his day in a max security prison, general population, bottom bunk buddied with a large bladdered serial bedwetter, and talkative Democrat. Need to kind of disagree. As good as getting him convicted would feel, it also gives him a platform to spew more lies to a willing cult. Instead of seeing what his last tweet's lies are every morning, we'll be hearing what he thinks about how badly he's being treated, and I've heard enough. With his team of put-it-off lawyers there would never be any satisfactory resolve, so let's lick our wounds and move on. We've got bigger fish to fry. Asterisk. Given how the post-election period has developed, it's not enough to remove this man from power. His authoritarian presence on the political stage, the cancer that he represents on the American body politic, must be obliterated, leaving absolutely no possibility of a second act. For he has in this past month declared total war on American democracy. And in this struggle, there can be no middle ground. There is a lot of talk of healing and moving on, of ignoring Trump's myriad crimes in order to somehow nurture the greater good. But healing involves, at the very least, acknowledgement of culpability on the part of the guilty. That was, after all, the foundational principle of South Africa's post-apartheid Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Trump is not only not admitting any culpability, but his rampage against the legal, political, and cultural pillars of American democracy is actually intensifying as his term in office draws to a close. Without even a nod to truth, there certainly can be no reconciliation. Trump's disgraceful, dangerous behavior, from his self-dealing while in government to his last-ditch efforts to subvert the popular will, is cratering trust in American democracy. For this, he must be made to face a legal reckoning. Asterisk. There also needs to be a special prosecutor who will actually charge, indict, and bring before a judge every person Trump pardons. To enact a pardon, you have to admit to your crime, in court, then your pardon becomes relevant. Most prosecutors don't bother indicting pardoned people because they can't get a conviction. Well, fuck that. Make those corrupt assholes stand up in court and admit their criminal acts. I think it's well worth the time and effort. Oh boy, media, can you give me a month? Shit, I'm trying to relax. I don't want to hear about Trump for the next decade. Fuck him. He's a criminal. He will fuck up and get his day in court now that he made an enemy out of 60% of the country. Until he goes to actual court, I don't want to hear about it. Focus on something else. There is a big country out there to pay attention to. I hate this. While I do think he should be investigated, pushing for this just makes me feel like the lock her up crowd from 4 years ago. The parallels of the past, lock her up, and the current, lock him up, crowd are unsettling to me. Kind of like looking in a dark mirror and not being sure if what's reflected back is correct. Op is not wrong. What is wrong is that it's taken Americans 4 years to figure out that Trump is a crook worthy of investigation. Red flags, want released tax returns, selected his family as his cabinet like every other banana republic, and destroyed relationship with allies to suck up to his dictator friends, and this was all before his inauguration. These red flags should have sparked enough suspicion to warrant further investigation of his business relationships and conflicts of interest. 4 years later and Trump still managed to get 74 million votes. How do we explain that to future generations? Lol. I was going to comment something about there's only punishment for treason, but then I realized that I don't want the shit stain to be executed. I would much prefer they take literally everything from him and his family, and force them all to live like the poors that they so detest. I seriously doubt the Biden administration is going to investigate Trump. He has a million more important things to do than investigate a washed-up has-been who isn't coming back. But, more importantly, investigating Trump is not a smart move in the long run. If we normalize the idea of politicians criminally investigating their political opponents, there is no end to the corruption that could ensue. Trump was the only president stupid enough to pull that nonsense, and it needs to end along with his presidency. There will be plenty of civil suits filed against Trump in the coming years. He will get what he deserves if he lives long enough. Well duh, but that ain't happening. Maybe in the SDNY, but otherwise, no way. Go after the criminality of his kids and namely, Jared. Jared knowingly shelved a national testing plan causing tens of thousands of deaths in the name of politics. Hit the kids for all the fraud in the Trump organization, cause there plenty there. This stuff would be a no-brainer if these people weren't in Trump's orbit. I believe those who are in power shouldn't be given special treatment when it comes to crimes they have committed. Being a leader of a nation doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. In the case of the United States president, this has to be done. Prosecute Trump even if it opens a new door which allows future or past presidents to be prosecuted for crimes they commit during their term. This way at least there will be accountability for every horrible action they do. No, I disagree. Trump couldn't have done a worse job as a president if he tried, but his worst crime was, further, dividing the American people into his supporters and opponents. To heal, America needs to put Trump behind it. Democrats should show that their way is better. They shouldn't stomp on their political opponents as a show of power. That's the kind of thing I'd expect Trump supporters to support. What is most scary and disturbing is over 74 million Americans agree with America being ruled by a dictator. One WHO could shoot someone and they don't care. One who has not even an ounce of moral or decency, blatantly and abundantly lies, self-deals, corrupt the courts, protects his cronies, pardons them when they do his evil deeds. I am deeply afraid America has turned the corner where we have sunk in a moral decay that there is no turning back. His cronies openly calls for public and government officials to be killed and tortured, and half of Americans are ecstatic and in agreement with it. There is no legal framework or will to counteract these crimes. I'm afraid this is the end of our beloved America, the beacon of hope, fairness, liberty, justice and kindness for all human beings. It was never perfect, but now I do not have hope. God help us all. We need to prosecute Trump, but we also need to limit the power of the executive. Even if Trump rots in prison, there will be somebody worse to divide the nation. When Sulla stopped Marius to save the Republic, the actions of Marius still inspired his son-in-law Gaius. This may be our last chance to preserve our Republic. The idea of just move on has wrecked this country. On Morning Joe today, Scarborough was calling for Biden to do like Ford and move on to heal the country. That moving on is what taught people like Oliver North and VP Cheney. If actions don't have consequences. If you can get away with breaking the law and being immoral while in office, then we are not a nation governed by laws. Instead, we are a nation divided by class, those who are above the law and those that are not. That is not the country I want to live in, and I hope the majority of Americans would like a more fair and just society as well. Once I saw the subheadline, "He has declared total war on American democracy, and for that, he must be brought to justice." I almost noped out of the article. I agree that Trump should be prosecuted for any and all criminality uncovered through the independent judicial process, but declaring total war on American democracy isn't a crime of fake. Whatever process brings Trump to justice must be completely impartial and apolitical for it to have any legitimacy. He must be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law and no further, and if the law doesn't go far enough to protect us from the next Trump, then we should change the law. You seem to be a bunch of children. Trump did not commit any actual crimes. Plus, it is almost impossible to convict a wealthy or famous person without one or more smoking guns. Plus, there has to be a real crime like rape or actual theft of money. Not vague shit like obstruction of justice, where no witness or judge was killed, bribed, etc. I don't see how there could be a fair trial. Sorry, it's not going to happen. If it did, Trump has a trump card, which is to reveal a whole slew of nasty secrets about other politicians, etc. that could take them down. And the next time if Biden is replaced with a Republican in 2024, then Biden can be prosecuted with whatever charges can be ginned up. Hopefully New York will step it up on January 21st. Trump illegally held money from New York State for political reasons. NY could just as easily collect these federal dollars and not hand them over to the feds. NY gives more money to the feds than it receives back. Unlike a state like, say, Kentucky, which is almost a complete polar opposite, in that it sends in little money but receives a lot. I forget what the stats are, but the poorest states in the country are deep red states. I came to the conclusion years ago, Dem or GOP, it don't make a bit of difference, they bicker of shot that don't mean much just to give the appearance of being on opposite sides, but when you sit down and look at the foreign policy, it's the same. The axis of evil Bush Jr. declared became the targets for the Obama administration. The reason we went to Syria was so Saudi Arabia can build a gas line to Eastern Europe. Our bad economic policies have been slow decline since Nixon, with every president contributing a bit all the way till now. Now Biden is putting together a cabinet that has most to all its with server conflict of interest problems, mostly which involves China. You want to arrest Trump, okay, but then we should be fair and arrest Bush, Clinton, Obama, and Biden, because they did by far a lot more illegal stuff than Trump did. To think establishment politicians care about the people, you're fooling yourself. All they care about is linking their own pockets at the price of selling out your future. Getting Biden now for president is just going to be going back to same old corruption. I feel so horrible for my kids because I have a hard time seeing a happy future for them, because if we don't stop this downhill slide, we are going to have a nothing left of this country. Our investigation found multiple acts by the president that were capable of exerting undue influence over law enforcement investigations, including the Russian interference and obstruction investigations, Mueller wrote. The incidents were often carried out through one-on-one meetings in which the president sought to use his official power outside of usual channels. These actions ranged from efforts to remove the special counsel and to reverse the effect of the Attorney General's recusal, to the attempted use of official power to limit the scope of the investigation, to direct and indirect contacts with witnesses with the potential to influence their testimony. Straight from the report, also from the report factoring into his decision not to weigh in on prosecution, Mueller wrote, was an opinion issued by the Office of Legal Counsel finding that the indictment or criminal prosecution of a sitting president would impermissibly undermine the capacity of the executive branch to perform its constitutionally assigned functions, in violation of the constitutional separation of powers. I think it also means that there needs to be a whole lot of governmental and constitutional reform to close up all these loopholes he and his delegate took absolute advantage of. His term has exposed how naive and vulnerable the regulations are, and it's far too dangerous to be left like that anymore. These weaknesses were not oversights, they were arranged to be manipulated as and when necessary, but with the expectation that presidencies would be held with some sense of honor, respect, and morality. It's quite clear this isn't the case. Trump himself isn't the only issue here, it's all his facilitators who ran the show for him while he played golf and signed whatever order they gave him. Trump's disgraceful, dangerous behavior, from his self-dealing while in government to his last-ditch efforts to subvert the popular will, is cratering trust in American democracy. For this, he must be made to face a legal reckoning. My problem with this argument is when you get into a fight with an idiot, you have to lower yourself to fight on their terms. Trump is already facing multiple criminal investigations concerning his financial and business interests and defamation suits relating to sexual misconduct. Let the courts deal with those. The article doesn't articulate what format any additional legal reckoning for Trump should take. If it's going to be another ridiculous impeachment-style charade designed for Pelosi and her Washington buddies to massage the Democrats' ego and increase their exposure on CNN, no thanks, I'll pass. At a time when millions of American citizens are facing hardship, struggling to pay rent through illness or unemployment linked to the national public health crisis, another circus in Washington which distracts politicians from dealing with urgent issues facing their voters is the last thing we need. This article, like many calls to prosecute Trump, fails to detail exactly what he should be prosecuted for. Unfortunately, the office of the president has wide legal and constitutional latitude, and outside of a potential obstruction of justice charge stemming from the Mueller probe, I have yet to see any convincing argument that Trump could reasonably be indicted and tried for any of his conduct as president. Financial crimes as a private citizen re. the SDNY investigation are another matter. But wait, that's not healing. The liberal press says we need healing, and therefore should look forward, and not dwell on the past. The liberal press says we should just not bother those sad, defeated Republicans, we should compromise and return to civility and just aw shucks and agree to disagree with the Nazis, torturers, and architects of forced sterilization. You know, come to think of it, this so-called liberal press sure says some fucked up, fascistic things. I am starting to think that maybe, just maybe, they are not so liberal. And that maybe, just maybe, looking forward, and civility, are a steaming load of horseshit. Not to be offensive or anything. We wouldn't want that, of course. Well, list the charges for which he should be prosecuted, or can be. What laws were broken, and what is the normal punishment for them? I don't think it is a crime just to be a dirtbag. The writer of this article, Abramsky, is very biased towards a particular perspective. You can't prosecute someone because you disagree with them or don't like them. There have to be laws that were broken. If there have been, then prosecute to your heart's content, and I wouldn't mind seeing Trump charged with something for which he's guilty. However, no one deserves prosecution without there being an actual crime involved. Sorry, I'm not trying to defend Trump, but hate blinds people to the reality. There were plenty of crimes. Obstruction of justice for one. Taking emoluments which could be bribery as well as unconstitutional. FEC violations, Hatch Act violations, and from before becoming president, money laundering, tax evasion, bank fraud, misuse of charity funds, settled admitting to a litany of wrongdoing and paying $2 million in damages, child rape, he's been indicted, and probably more. At the very least, these very widely reported and credible allegations, or in many cases, plain as daylight actions, need to be investigated. On what grounds? What actual crime has Donald Trump committed that there is sufficient evidence of to convict him? You can't just prosecute him for being an asshole. That's not how American courts work, at least not the ones that obey the law. You must be able to prove beyond reasonable doubt that he committed a crime using actual, relevant evidence, not propaganda and yellow journalism from the puppet masters. The article was pretty light on evidence supporting a criminal indictment. That's not to say that Trump isn't abhorrent, he is. But the author seemed emotional and hyperbolic instead of informed and convincing. I imagine Trump is guilty of financial crimes and, if he is, he should be prosecuted. But if he's using his power to do shit you don't like, i.e. building a wall and deporting immigrants, then you vote him out, which we did, thank God.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like the video. And if you are new, subscribe and click on the bell icon.